The morning sun was just starting to paint the ridiculously manicured lawns of Harmony Heights, a sickly sweet shade of green. Harmony Heights, the name itself was enough to make you gag, especially when you knew the kind of petty tyranny that lurked beneath its perfectly trimmed hedges. I, John, was halfway through my first cup of coffee, a dark, bitter brew that was the only thing keeping me from crawling back into bed, when the knock came. We weren't expecting anyone. And in this neighborhood, unexpected knocks were rarely a prelude to anything good. It was usually a misplaced Amazon package, a lost dog, always a ridiculously small, yappy breed, or, God forbid, Karen Whitmore. I set my mug down with a sigh, the ceramic clinking against the countertop. Karen Whitmore, the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association, a woman whose veins probably pumped pure, undiluted vinegar. I stretched, cracking my knuckles, already bracing myself for whatever fresh hell she was about to unleash. Swinging open the door, I found my suspicions confirmed. There she stood, clutching a clipboard to her chest like it contained the launch codes for nuclear war. Her lips were pursed so tightly they almost disappeared, a sure sign she'd just finished sucking on a lemon, or, more likely, reviewing the HOA bylaws. "We need to talk," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of artificial politeness that made your teeth ache. I leaned against the doorframe, trying to project an air of casual indifference, even though my insides were already churning. "Karen," I said, managing a weary smile, "it's barely past 7. It's too early for whatever this is." She ignored me, naturally. Karen Whitmore was a force of nature, and pleasantries were merely obstacles to be bulldozed. She thrust a folded piece of paper into my hand. "Your brother is in violation of our HOA guidelines," she declared, her voice rising slightly. "If this continues, there will be consequences." The word consequences hung in the air, heavy and ominous, like a poorly aimed threat from a low-budget supervillain. I knew before I even unfolded the note that it wasn't going to be good. My brother David, war veteran, was the problem. I unfolded the letter, a sense of dread pooling in my stomach. It was typed, of course, in that sterile, official-looking font that HOAs seemed to adore. My eyes scanned the page, and then I nearly choked on my own spit. "Mr. David Carter," I read aloud, my voice dripping with disbelief, "has been seen repeatedly wearing unauthorized attire in the neighborhood, specifically military camouflage. This disrupts the, wait for it, visual harmony of the community and may be intimidating to other residents." I blinked, read it again. "Seriously?" I asked, looking up at Karen, who stood there, a statue of smug disapproval. Her expression didn't change. "Very." I leaned back against the doorframe, shaking my head. "You're telling me my brother, who just got back from serving his country, can't wear camo in his own driveway?" Karen's nose twitched, as if the word country itself was a personal affront. "It's not about him," she said, her voice tight. "It's about the rules. HOA policy clearly states that residents must maintain a neutral and non-disruptive aesthetic within community spaces." I took a slow, deep breath, trying to maintain some semblance of calm. I'd heard ridiculous things from this HOA before, but this was next level. "Karen," I said, rubbing my temples, "do you have any idea who my brother is?" "I don't care if he's the mayor," she shot back, her eyes narrowed. "Rules are rules." I couldn't help but laugh, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. If only she knew. Inside the house, David was in the kitchen, already making coffee. He heard the muffled voices, the edge in Karen's tone. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, a tightening around his eyes. He'd been back less than a week, trying to decompress, to find some semblance of peace after everything. The last thing he needed was this kind of nonsense. I walked back inside, still chuckling darkly. "You're not going to believe this," I said, handing David the letter. He took it, his expression unreadable as he scanned the page. The easy smile that had been slowly returning to his face over the past few days faded. He finished reading, exhaled slowly, and handed the paper back.
"They have a problem with me wearing camo," he stated.
Not a question. "Oh, not just camo," I said, barely containing my laughter. "They think you're disrupting the visual harmony of the community." David tilted his head, as if waiting for the punchline. When it didn't come, he simply nodded. All right. All right? I narrowed my eyes. That's it? All right. A slow smirk spread across David's face. "Oh, I'm going to have fun with this." Karen Whitmore, standing on her perfectly manicured lawn, felt a surge of righteous indignation. This blatant disregard for the rules, it was unacceptable. She pulled out her phone, already composing a strongly worded email to the rest of the HOA board. This would be dealt with decisively. Later that day, David was in the backyard, grilling steaks. He moved with a practiced efficiency, flipping the meat with the tongs like he was conducting a delicate military operation. He was wearing camo pants, along with a plain black t-shirt. "They have a problem with these?" he asked, gesturing to his pants with the tongs as I handed him a beer. I took a swig. "Apparently, they're a threat to the aesthetic integrity of Harmony Heights." David snorted.
"I've dealt with warlords who had more flexibility."
I grinned.
"I can't wait to see what you do."
The next morning, I woke up to find David standing in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing his teeth. But it wasn't the morning routine that caught my attention. It was what he was wearing. Full military fatigues, tactical boots, even his beret. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Really?" David met my gaze in the mirror, a mischievous glint in his eyes, toothbrush still in his mouth. "Oh, it's war now." An hour later, he casually strolled out to check the mailbox, dressed like he was about to parachute into a combat zone. A few neighbors peeked through their blinds, some clearly entertained, others whispering in concern, and then there was Karen, standing on her porch gripping her phone like it was a weapon. Mrs. Henderson, watering her petunias, nearly dropped her watering can as David waved at her, a cheerful grin on his face. Two teenage boys on skateboards stopped and stared, whispering to each other, "Dude, is that a real soldier?" Mr. Peterson, a retired accountant known for his strict adherence to routine, spilled his morning coffee as he watched David walk by. I sipped my coffee, watching the unfolding chaos from the safety of the front porch. Karen stormed across the street, her heels clicking aggressively against the pavement. "This is an escalation!" she snapped, her face flushed. David turned as if just now noticing her. "Oh, I thought we were enforcing dress codes." Her eye twitched. "This is not funny." David nodded solemnly. "I agree. Dress code violations are a serious matter." Karen, trembling with frustration, lifted her phone. "I'm documenting this." David saluted again, a picture-perfect military salute. "Make sure to get my good side." That was the last straw. Karen turned on her heel and stormed off, furiously typing into her phone, no doubt drafting another formal complaint, maybe even a new HOA amendment, specifically outlawing military personnel from dressing like, well, military personnel. I shook my head, grinning. "You're playing a dangerous game, man." David's smile was almost lazy. "You say dangerous, I say entertaining." Later that evening, an official letter from the HOA arrived. This time, it wasn't just a warning. It was a formal notice of violation with threats of escalating action. I read it aloud, then looked up at David, who was calmly chewing on a steak. "She's doubling down," I said. David leaned back in his chair, utterly relaxed. "Good." I raised an eyebrow. "Good?" He took another bite, chewing thoughtfully before replying, "Because now I get to have some real fun." 20 years ago, Karen hadn't been the iron-fisted ruler of Harmony Heights. She'd been different, married to a soldier, a man named Frank, who had deployed overseas. He'd come back changed, distant. The marriage had crumbled, leaving Karen bitter and resentful, not just towards Frank, but towards the entire institution he represented, the rigid rules of the HOA, the control she exerted over her little domain, were her way of imposing order on a world that had once felt chaotic and unfair, and the seemingly empty treasury. It turns out that HOA fees weren't being entirely used on landscaping. A few days later, I got a text from Chris, a neighbor who lived down the street, and a member of our little resistance group. Dude, your brother just walked into the grocery store looking like he's on a black ops mission. Karen saw him. She's on the warpath. I grinned. I didn't even need to ask what happened. I could picture it perfectly. David, strolling through the aisles, grabbing eggs and milk like a regular person, while dressed like he was about to conduct a covert operation. And Karen, she was probably foaming at the mouth. The grocery store incident had been interesting. Karen had nearly had an aneurysm in the produce section. She'd started ranting about community standards and how I was making a scene. But then something unexpected happened. A guy in the store, recognizing me from a news interview a while back, shook my hand, thanked me for my service. Karen looked like she'd swallowed a lemon, and then she made the mistake of calling store security. Security showed up, took one look at me and, well, one of them was a former soldier. He saw my unit patch and immediately called me Sir. Karen stormed out after that. David recounted the story later, still grinning. She called security on me, and they ended up saluting me instead. I burst out laughing. You're kidding! Nope, David said, grabbing a bottle of water, and she's not done yet. That prediction turned out to be correct. Another letter arrived, this one a formal warning, filled with legal jargon. They're really doubling down, I said, reading it aloud. David leaned back, unfazed. Good. That's what makes it fun. I sighed. You're enjoying this way too much. Of course I am, David said. This isn't a fight she can win. She just doesn't know it yet. Susan, Karen's best friend, an HOA board member. Susan is someone who blindly follows Karen. The HOA meeting room was a sterile, beige box, designed to stifle any hint of individuality or dissent. Karen sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, her face a mask of grim satisfaction. A stack of papers sat in front of her, a testament to her relentless pursuit of, well, whatever it was she was pursuing. David walked in wearing his full uniform. I followed behind, taking a seat next to him. The room was tense, everyone waiting for the explosion. Karen cleared her throat. Mr. Carter, she said, her voice sharp, we've reached a decision. David gave her a polite smile. Oh, please, enlighten me. Karen slid a document across the table. You are officially being fined for non-compliance with HOA regulations. If you refuse to pay, we will be forced to take further legal action. That won't hold up, Susan said, but was quickly hushed by Karen. David glanced at the paper, then leaned back, the picture of calm. You do realize I'm an active duty military officer, right? Karen scoffed. That doesn't exempt you from the rules of this neighborhood. David nodded. You're right, it doesn't. But you know what it does exempt me from? Karen blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. David pulled out his phone, scrolled for a second, then turned the screen around. He played a short clip from a government website. The video clearly outlined a federal law protecting active military personnel from discrimination in housing policies, including HOA restrictions that unfairly target their service. The room went silent. Karen's lips thinned. That's irrelevant. David raised an eyebrow. A federal law is irrelevant. Karen straightened her posture. We are an independent homeowners association. Our regulations are legally binding. David took a slow sip of water. He'd brought his own, of course. No, they're not. Not when they directly violate federal law. Karen's eye twitched. One of the other board members, a nervous-looking man named Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat. Karen, is this, something we checked before issuing the fine? Karen shot him a glare. This is about maintaining community standards. I grinned. Pretty sure federal law outranks the HOA handbook. Another board member, Mrs. Rodriguez, sighed. Karen, I don't think we can actually enforce this. Karen's face turned a dangerous shade of red. This is an internal matter, David smirked. Not anymore. See, I called a friend last night. He works with the legal team at the base. Turns out they're very interested in what you're doing here. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You called a military lawyer? David shrugged. I figured since you wanted to take legal action, I should be prepared. And then David dropped the bomb. Besides, he said, his voice low and steady, I have it on good authority that the HOA's finances aren't exactly pristine. Karen went pale. The board members exchanged nervous glances. What are you talking about? Karen stammered. David leaned forward. Let's just say someone might have been using the HOA funds for personal expenses. Mr. Henderson coughed. I think it's best if we just drop this. Karen turned on him, her voice rising. You're giving in? We can't allow this to stand. I leaned forward. Karen, let me ask you something. If this goes to court and you lose, what do you think happens next? Karen's jaw tightened. David answered for her. It means not only will the HOA be forced to drop every single one of these complaints, but you might also face legal repercussions for targeting an active duty officer and for potential financial misconduct. A bead of sweat formed on Karen's forehead. Mrs. Rodriguez spoke again, her voice firmer this time. Karen, I move that we table this discussion and drop all charges against Mr. Carter. I second that, Mr. Henderson said quickly. Susan reluctantly agreed. Karen looked like she wanted to scream. She gripped the papers in front of her so tightly her knuckles turned white, but she knew it was over. The HOA had no choice. Finally, she exhaled sharply. Fine, David smiled. I appreciate your cooperation. Karen stood up so quickly her chair nearly toppled over. Without another word, she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. The remaining board members sat in awkward silence before Mr. Henderson sighed. Well, that was eventful. David stood up, shaking a few hands. I hope we can all get along better moving forward. As we walked out of the meeting hall, I grinned at David. So, does this mean we won? David smirked. We won the battle. I arched an eyebrow. You think she's going to try something else? Oh, absolutely, David said. People like Karen don't just give up. And he was right. Over the next few days, Karen tried everything. Passive-aggressive emails, flyers about proper neighborhood attire, even stopping random neighbors to complain about the threat to community values. But it didn't matter. The board had made its decision. She had lost. Then, one evening, as David and I were relaxing on the porch, we saw it. A moving truck. Karen was packing up. I stared in disbelief. No way. David smirked. Told you she'd dig her own grave. We watched as Karen barked orders at the movers, her face twisted in frustration. She spotted us across the street, and for a brief second, our eyes met. I gave her a little wave. David, ever the professional, simply nodded in acknowledgement. Karen turned away, muttering something under her breath as she stomped back inside. Susan was nowhere in sight. I grinned. I can't believe it. She's actually leaving. David stretched. She made herself unwelcome. This was inevitable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the neighborhood seemed lighter, more peaceful. The reign of Karen Whitmore was officially over. That weekend, David hosted a barbecue. It was a celebration, a way to bring the community together after all the drama. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak up before finally shared their own HOA horror stories. Laughter filled the air. I nudged David. You realize this is going to be one of those legendary stories people tell for years, right? David smirked. Good. So what now? I asked. Now. He took a slow sip of beer. I finally get to relax. Perhaps that was wishful thinking. Given the type of place Harmony Heights was, there was always another Karen waiting in the wings. But for now, peace had returned.